Good morning. My name is Barkha Dutt, and welcome to all the viewers of The Mojo Story, our independent digital platform where we take a deep dive into the issues that really matter. Now, as all of you know, our focus has been on the farm protests for the last many days. We have also been reporting on the ground, bringing you voices, images, first-person accounts, and reports that are chronicling the agitation that is unfolding at the borders of our capital city. You've heard from the farmers, you've heard from experts, you've heard from politicians who think that these new farm laws are a terrible idea, that they're going to promote corporate interests over the interests of ordinary farmers. But since we are strictly empirical, since our journalism is guided not by our ideology, but by facts only, and this is a deeply technical, complex subject, we're here today to bring you a counter view from someone who actually believes that farm reform is much needed, is long overdue, and that there has been a misinformation campaign, a communication gap that needs to be addressed. So to hear and understand the counter view to all the critics who think that farm laws are going to sell the farmers literally down the road, we are joined by one of India's preeminent agricultural economists, Ashok Gulati. Welcome to the show, sir. In an intuitive sort of way, for those of us who are lay people, you see men and women on the road, you hear the word corporate, you see, the underdog, and your heart goes to the underdog. This is how, unfortunately or fortunately, we are trained to think. You're here to explain to us that it may not be quite that simple. Can you explain why the meta-narrative that these laws are basically going to promote the big industrial houses, the Adanis and the Ambanis, over the interests of the ordinary peasant is not quite the narrative that you believe in?
Well, I think 2-3 basic facts that we should remember. Right now, more than 90% of agriculture produce is being sold to the private sector. Right? More than 90% of the agriculture produce. Now, there is a private sector, but small private sector, which cannot build the supply lines that are needed for efficient functioning of any good markets. The laws did not allow. Take the case of stocking limits. At the drop of a hat, government used to put stocking limits. Then who will build storage capacity? In the absence of storage capacity, when the farmer brings produce in the market, because there is very limited storage capacity, the prices crash at the time of harvest. And when at the lean season, there is nothing left and the prices spike. So the volatility in prices that you see in onions or tomatoes or potatoes and all this is one of the factors why you have not allowed big players to build the supply lines. It requires massive capital investment. Either the government should do it, but government will do what can government do? It built some storage houses of FCI in 70s and 80s when the country needed. But should the government be opening potato stores and cold storages and all this? This is all over the world. It's a part of the private sector. And the private sector on the roadside, the small pygmy private sector, he can be, buying the things at 2 rupees a kg, 4 rupees a kg from the farmers. Nobody shouts at that time. Right? You have to stabilize the prices through an assured pricing, a contract farming type of a model. And those players have to build from the storage to processing to exports to urban centers. All seamless flow has to go on. Production will come at a point of time, consumption goes throughout the year. Somebody has to do that job.
So one of the points that you made is that more than 90% of agricultural produce is already sold to the private sector. We have the Shanta Kumar panel that tells us that only under 6% of farmers are covered by the MSP. But what the farmers of Punjab and Haryana at least are arguing is that when it comes to wheat and paddy, there has been a system that has been working. It may have its flaws, but to mend a broken system or to fill those gaps, you can't create a system where there is neither a minimum price guaranteed nor a minimum procurement guaranteed. I guess my question would be, if the aim is really to remove the middleman, how do we avoid a new kind of middleman? So when I was, for example, I asked the same question to P. Sainath, he said the only difference will be the new middleman, the new tout will be wearing Gucci and Armani, right? So you're replacing one sort of, I know it's rhetorical, but I need to put it on the table because that is how these laws are being perceived on the ground.
They are being misconceived and misinformed. Unfortunate
Okay.
to say that.
Okay.
Okay. I think this is where the politics, but I don't want to get into the politics. I'm not an activist or a politician. I'm a professional. I'll give you what happens on the ground when this MSP business that you said only 6% of the farmers have sold their produce at MSP. It is primarily state like Punjab. It's not more than 5-6 states, upper limit 7 states in India that have gained from that MSP system, and Punjab was the biggest gainer. You look at the Punjab data right now, whatever comes in the market, 95 to 98% is bought by the state. Now, what happens when the state buys? There is an MSP, and then Artia gets 2.5% commission, and the state takes 6% commission from not commission, it's called the mandi fee and the rural development cess. Yeah. It's about 4,500 to 5,000 crores that it varies. It used to be 14.5%. Remember that before the GST reforms. So with the GST reforms, it came. So they were getting good money out of this. Part of that is spent in rural development and all that. But I feel this is hugely inflated thing. It was an easy way to squeeze a lot of resources from the center because center cannot run its PDS without Punjab's contribution. And that money, then they will give free electricity to the farmers. In a way, politically, all the votes come to them and all the expenditure is borne by the central government. You want to sell wheat and rice at 2 rupees and 3 rupees a kg through PDS, and you want to impose to 8.5% even now on top of MSP. Why don't you do that procurement in Bihar, where the prices of paddy today are 1,500, against an MSP of 1868, right? So what was needed? Punjab did great job after the Green Revolution, but Punjab's income of the farmers cannot go up through wheat and rice. They have reached a saturation point in terms of productivity. Now they are depleting water table. Free, power is playing havoc there, but it suits politically. So you are very short-sighted. You need to have a medium to long-term vision for any policy maker to give Punjab farmers double the income they are earning today. But that cannot come through wheat and rice.
Okay, now these are two separate arguments. One is the kind of over-dependence of Punjab's agricultural model on wheat and rice, its depletion of the water table. And that's one set of arguments. But let's say you even got them to change that. The question right now that is being raised is about crony capitalism, about, let's say, a big supermarket chain of a big corporate now determining the price at which something is procured. So, for example, on a live stream, we have a question saying for you that more than 90% may be sold to private players, but right now there's no monopoly of any one big player. And the apprehension that in an unregulated way, if you remove the mandi system, you will have domination of just a handful of players, basically the same unregulated model that, let's say, we've seen in telecom, where you said you were freeing the markets, where your regulatory framework didn't really work well, and you ended up with 3 major players, one of whom may not survive. So this question about the dominance of a handful of big corporate players, does that concern you?
First, mandi system is not being abolished, right? MSP is not going away. So if the farmer wants to sell in the mandi, who is stopping the farmer? And this is a misconception that if you go to the APMC market, you will get an MSP. It's only in Punjab and Haryana for wheat and rice. That's all. Rajasthan has so many APMC markets. Bajra is being sold at 1,200, 1,300 rupees a quintal against an MSP of 1,700 plus, 1,800. So APMC markets do not guarantee you MSP you will get. It's only in Punjab, Haryana, and a few 2, 3, 4 states. That's all. So the question is, I call it, when you had Indian Airlines monopoly, right? You will have something, but the continuous losses of Indian Airlines, 5,000, 7,000 crores every year, and the debt burden and all this. Now, if you are allowing 4 more airlines to operate, are you creating monster of corporate takeover? Well, the consumer is getting a better deal. There is a competition. If there is an oligopolistic structure and they try to, join hands and extort the market or the consumer, let the CCI, Competition Commission of India, look into that.
Okay, so 2-3 different things. One of the things you said is who's stopping the mandi system, and MSP is not going away. Now, most of the farmers that I met on the ground, they had one simple thing to ask, and they said, if the government, and the Prime Minister downwards have said this, is committing itself to the minimum support price, why would you not find a way of writing in some threshold into the law? Now, I understand that the MSP is administrative and it's not legislative, and that it changes year to year. But there has been a proposal that basically you say the private players cannot buy below the MSP. So you do not trade below a threshold that is defined by that year's MSP, and this should be written into the law. My simple question is, if the MSP is not going away, why are we not able to find a way of working this into the law?
Sure. Even while you are writing 23 commodities MSP is announced, you will find hundreds and thousands cases all over the country in APMC markets where the prices go below or sometimes even above. It depends upon demand and supply. Now, the government says, okay, let's do it, make it a legal thing. Now, legal thing, if you can't sell it below that and there is excess production, what will happen? No private sector will come forward because they will face the prison if they buy it below that, and supply exceeding demand, the price will go down. Now the government can procure and store. Today, the buffer stocks of wheat and rice are 2.5 times the buffer stock norms. It's a massive inefficiency in the operations of Food Corporation of India, right? And in the name of this, okay, you have procured open-ended procurement. Now, if you want to create this type of a monster where the stocks are, in June, they were 97 million tons against the need of 42 million tons. Now, who is paying for that? Hundreds and lakhs of, thousands and lakhs of crores are locked in without a purpose. You don't need them. So, do you want to create a situation where the private sector goes away because if the excess production is there, they won't buy because they can be imprisoned?
But then are you suggesting that the private sector can buy at whatever rate it determines? In which case,
who determines?
That's what my question was going to be. My question was going to be that in your model, where you're saying that if there is a regulated, guaranteed MSP and the threshold trading level is set by the law, the private sector would not want to enter that space. My question to you would be, who determines the price of potatoes? Let me ask a dumb question.
The market determines, the demand and supply determines, and what you need to work on is how to get the markets right, because markets are also not perfect.
But if the market determines the price of potatoes, then in effect, sir, please correct me if I'm wrong, there is no MSP. If the free market is really going to determine without regulation and government intervention the price of potatoes, onions, wheat, paddy, whatever, then there is no MSP. So when the government says that the MSP is not going away, that is not true, correct?
If the government wants to give that MSP, government can procure anything that they want. They have a price stabilization scheme where if the prices go below a certain threshold, then they can procure. So enhance that. But private sector forcing them to buy at this, to me, will lead to a massive mess in the system.
So in your model, or in the model that you are suggesting, basically the government will procure at MSP, the private players will procure at a price determined by the market. Am I summarizing correctly?
The idea when in 1965 the APC, Agriculture Prices Commission, and Food Corporation of India, they were created, that if the market prices are higher than the MSP, the private sector farmers should be allowed to sell to them. But if it falls below that, then the government will come and buy those to provide a floor. Okay. It is government's job, not the private sector's job.
I've understood what you're saying, and there are counter questions coming on our live stream. Inder Pal says, in this scenario, nobody will in fact buy from the mandis. This will de facto stop, even if this is technically not being stopped by the bills. And I think this is a reasonable question, because it's the same question I was asking, which is that the private players are not going to go to the MSP price, right? They're going to pick up a lower price if they can. That's the nature.
Who is buying at MSP in APMC markets? You are mistaken that in APMC markets, they are getting MSP. No. Beyond wheat and rice in Punjab and Haryana, no. I gave you the bajra price. I gave you maize price. They are all being sold in APMC markets. Where is the MSP? So the only way is, if government wants to ensure, there are two ways. One, either government directly goes and buys, let's say 10%, 20% of the produce to lift the market, so that the market price doesn't come below that. Second is, you can make, that's a little, I have to explain how that works. There are options. The farmers can buy options in the commodity derivative exchange at MSP. If the market prices go below that, then the government can give that deficiency payment to the farmers. Many countries have experimented with that. But here what will happen is, the moment, because this price deficiency payment was experimented in one season in Madhya Pradesh, then the private sector says, oh, if the government is going to give you the deficiency, even the prices go further down. So the bill of the government starts increasing. So there are no easy solutions. We should focus on how to increase the income of the farmers.
And I will get to that in a moment, but I just want to be very accurate about how I'm interpreting, understanding, and summarizing your position. One, the market has to determine demand, supply, and therefore pricing. And this will, in the end, benefit the farmer. That's your one argument. The second argument is, in any case, 90% of produce is already going to private players. So focus on how to increase the cost of the income of farmers.
How to improve the efficiency of the markets.
All right. Third, the MSP as guaranteed to the farmers of Punjab and Haryana and the way they're accustomed to it, that option still exists for the government, both MSP and procurement, but you cannot enforce that threshold on the private sector, because the private sector will then not want to get into the space. Am I?
And that will hurt farmers even more, because government will not have the wherewithal to buy everything.
Okay.
Then why not MSP for milk? Why not MSP for the tomato, onion, potatoes, everything?
Got it. So the question again keeps coming. Wouldn't the farmers be disadvantaged, since you've spoken about focusing on increasing the income of farmers? Wouldn't the farmers be disadvantaged by price suppression by the oligarchs? So the sense that the private sector would drive the prices down that are available to farmers, and therefore how would their income increase or improve? That continues to be the worry, right?
Yes. So let's come to the main question, because the very fact I've spent my whole life in trying to increase the income of the farmers. There are 4 ways to do it. One, you increase productivity to start with, because that gives you competitiveness, that increases your productivity and your income. Punjab has reached a saturation limit in wheat and rice. In wheat, their productivity is about 5 tons per hectare. So the further marginal improvement that can be made will be at a very, very high cost. Now, second is diversification to high value crops. If you are growing high value crops, fruits, vegetables, your income is 3 times more than the income of wheat and rice farmers. And Punjab is a blessed state, 99% irrigation. Wow. You have one of the best infrastructure in the rural areas in Punjab. So Punjab should have graduated, and this is not me, Professor Joel from Punjab, the wise man of Punjab, suggested this in 1986. In fact, Captain Amrinder Singh himself in 1985 said we have to diversify to high value agriculture. So I think there has to be a package by the central government and the Punjab government. I have suggested and I have written on that 10,000 crore package of diversifying to high value crops. Now, this is not going to happen tomorrow. It needs a 3 to 5 year plan. And you have to invest in a different type of infrastructure, and all those things could be exported, could be sent in a packaged form to urban areas. The incomes of the farmers will increase. So second is the diversification package.
Okay.
Third, which farmers are trying to get actually is higher and higher MSP. This is not a sustainable solution. Countries have tried that. It's not that US tried that early in 60s and 70s, and then Europe tried that, and you remember the mountains of butter and lakes of milk, and every country after country left that because it leads to massive inefficiency. So it's better to support the farmers through R&D, through better infrastructure, and through diversification. The fourth and the last point is actually getting out of agriculture. There is always the development story of the world tells us that people have moved out of agriculture. In fact, in Punjab, only 25-26% of the workforce is in agriculture compared to the all India picture of 43%.
Right.
So Punjab farmers have moved to London and Canada and Australia and wherever, and that's how they increase their income. There is a huge local tenancy here, oral tenancy. Sorry.
So so I'm continuing to get questions on what happens in the meantime, right? The four ideas that you have listed is a long-term systemic project, right? Now, for example, we have Gunreet Kaur who says, can Professor Gulati tell us what should a farmer do when he gives his produce of sugarcane to the mill owner and gets paid after a year? Please tell us why the farmer should not ask for MSP to be legalized, right? So I think that because
this is what I'm saying. The moment you are forcing the private sector to give that, MSP in case of sugar, it's not MSP because it's not the government that is giving, it is forcing the sugar mills to give that. Now, sugar mill, and the politics of UP is a typical case study in this. They announce state advised price. So whenever the elections come, they jack up the price. Now, if the price of sugar doesn't support that, at the end of the round, it is the sugar price primarily which will determine what the price of the cane would be. How much can be paid? If you want 90% of the sugar price to be paid, all the mills will become sick and they will come to NCLT. We are sick now, the banks deal with it. That's why it lingers on. In the law, it is written within 15 days, they have to pay. Now, who pays that? For 1 year, you look at, and now you produce excess sugar, 6 million tons are lying there. It is non-exportable because you are not competitive, your prices are high. What do you do with it?
So, sir, you're in effect saying that the surplus is only adding inefficiency. And I can understand that as an argument, but everything that you have said basically to me sounds like the MSP system is in effect going, that the only enforceability to the MSP system will be the government if it decides to step in and basically give that minimum support price, but otherwise the private players will be determining the price of onions. I mean, to just put it simply, competitiveness among those players, and those players will probably drive the price lower and lower. That's the nature of competition.
That's a presumption, your presumption, not my presumption.
Please correct me. No, please correct me if I'm wrong. Yes.
I would say getting the markets right should be the focus of the government. And how do you get the markets right? First, the information asymmetry has to be removed. And the digital world today, you can tell which mandi, what prices are prevailing, and farmers can choose. Bring them on the digital platform to sell. If you and me can get our products on Amazon and we compare with 10 other retailers, why the farmer should not get that type of a platform to sell his produce digitally across? But you have to standardize that. You have to get farmer producer organizations. So I would say government has announced that there would be a 1 lakh crore fund for post-harvest infrastructure to be created and 10,000 additional farmer producer organizations. That needs to be expedited. I think that's the way So strengthen the farmer producer organization, remove the information asymmetry, support them with better infrastructure. That is much more sustainable and it will make your whole system much more competitive, and remove export bans. I'm dead against when the government puts at the drop of a hat कि बिहार का election हो रहा है, onion price ऊपर नहीं चले जाए, put an export ban or stocking limit. That's why we have been saying this for 20 years. Please, when you are trying to suppress prices, basically you are asking the farmer to subsidize your consumers, and in the process you are making farmers poor. On the whole, I do feel, and I've done 20 years of research on this, that Indian farmer is still net taxed despite the input subsidies. All other countries give much higher subsidies, but the way to give those subsidies should be through better infrastructure, through better, institutional framework, and all the supply line building. That's the way to go. R&D. Productivity has to increase at the end of the run, not by higher and higher prices.
Right. So you're saying the subsidies should come in other forms that actually in the long run make the farmers more self-reliant than reliant on the MSP system. But can you just paint a scenario of how this MSP would work? So let's say the agitation ends. Let's say hypothetically the agitation ends, though the farmers don't seem to be in any mood to pull back their agitation, but hypothetically the agitation ends, the laws get enforced, the private players enter the market, and let's say the private players are buying at the market rate, but the government steps in with MSP on wheat and paddy. What would happen?
Wheat and paddy is already, the maximum government intervention is in wheat and paddy.
Yeah. So how would this work? Why and in which circumstance would the government step in with that MSP? Who would sell to private sector and who would sell to the government? How would this be determined? How would this actually work in simple terms?
The mandis are going to be there. If the government wants that for 23 commodities, they announce MSP, and this should be in a way implemented all across India, government will go broke. I can tell you that. It doesn't have the financial resources.
So what would happen?
No, this is what I'm saying. So you have to, government gives a notional thing. First, no country in the world perhaps has 23 commodities under any price support program. So what you need to, the policy instrument needs to change. That's what I'm saying. If you want to keep your critical commodities 2 or 3 or 4, I will give you, China used to do it for 4 commodities. In 2016, they said we can't handle this and they gave up corn. Wheat and rice still they support. But then they can have, hundreds of million tons lying without any purpose. Fine, good enough. It's the economic inefficiency of the system. If the government wants to do that, let it do. But private sector is not forced to buy at that rate. Otherwise, you will destroy the markets altogether.
Now look at the question on your screen. Farmers of Bihar and UP have no stake in farming now. They're landless part-time laborers. Punjab and Haryana farmers live on farming. Therefore, MSP is an issue primarily in these 2 states.
Who is taking away their MSP? This is the fear psychosis that has been created. Let the Punjab keep on doing wheat and rice for another 20 years. It's not in their interest. Their own wise people in 80s said, let's diversify. If they don't want to listen to that, what are they doing? They are depleting their water table. They are creating stubble burning and all the pollution. And it's less said the better on that.
When you say that the market should determine the price of onions and tomatoes, what can you convey why you believe that would not hurt agricultural income? Because that's where the hub of the debate is, right? The hub of the debate is your intent is also that the farmers earn more. The farmers believe that they're going to earn less in this system. So if the market is determining that rate, can you just maybe explain why you believe that will eventually help the farmer?
That's the only sustainable way. government intervention in tomatoes and potatoes and grapes and bananas, if you want to do that, God bless you. I think that there is no policy needed. You want to go back to that Soviet Russia where even the egg price, then why not fix maximum prices for all agriculture commodities for the consumers? Egg price can't be more than 3 rupees and onion price cannot be more than 15 rupees. Why not that? Where is the end?
But here's the question. You spoke about the diversification of crops. I know these are probably agricultural families who are writing in on their stream. So Shivdeep Sandhu says if the MSP were offered on other crops, farmers would happily diversify.
Sure, go ahead, do that. And then there will be glut of potatoes. At the end of the round, you cannot swim against the forces of markets. Please remember this. Russia tried it. That whole socialist model is thrown out of the window. Okay, you want to go back 70 years where you want to determine the price of each and everything. China is China today when they started giving up their ideology. So I'm not saying that markets give a perfect solution, but the effort should be to make the markets work better and more efficiently. And that's what I said, information asymmetry, the infrastructure, the institutional structure of farmers' organizations, all these things. Amul, for example, milk is a classic case. I give an example. And milk, by the way, the value of milk is more than the value of wheat, rice, and sugarcane combined. You ask Mr. Sodi, our great friend, and he would tell you, we are competing with Nestle's of the world, and we are also competing with the Hexons of this world, which is the largest private sector dairy in the south. So are they exploiting? Our farmer wants to sell it to Nestle, fine. Farmer wants to sell it to Varka, fine. Farmer wants to sell it to Amul, fine. Let there be competition. But you have to build infrastructure, collection centers, cooling, coolers needed, and then processing facilities needed. Now, those small traders cannot do it. It is the people with deep pockets who are investors. So you need to link the farmer with the processors.
Okay,
Only then the income will go up.
Okay, I have a couple of minutes left, but I do have one interesting question about, this two mandi system, as it's being called. And I think what Praveen Shekhar on our screen is saying is that they're effectively two markets, right? One is the private sector market that is like where the prices are in free fall and they're settling at a natural demand and supply sort of equilibrium, right? And then there is the government-run mandi system, which, as you keep saying, is not going away, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is the question that's come back. Praveen Shekhar says, you keep saying no one is going to take away the mandi, but the two mandi system, I think he means the two market systems that I've just elaborated, will automatically create an ecosystem that the MSP mandi, the MSP market, will not exist. It will de facto cease to exist. Therefore, we want an MSP mandatory to private corporations as well.
This is this is his view. I respect that view, but I don't think this is
I'm
feasible.
saying these are the questions that farmers are asking on the street, so we need to figure out a way to answer these questions.
Farmers, with all the due respect to farmers, and my whole life has been committed to that work for the welfare of farmers. They would love to have free power. They would love to have free fertilizers. But is that a policy? It is damaging. Dramatically damaging. The same money can be given directly into their cash accounts, but do start charging the proper price for power and fertilizers, please, for God's sake. But give farmers 10,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees directly into their account on per hectare basis. That is a much, much better way rather than subsidizing prices of inputs and increasing the prices of outputs. Prices is not a sustainable and an efficient solution. Let it be very clear.
What is the safety net for farmers as the market finds its natural demand and supply numbers? What is the safety net?
There are 2-3 basic things that we can do.
Yeah.
If you want to try price deficiency payments, if the prices go below a certain cutoff point, you want to compensate the farmers, but you have to have a very robust method. As I said, you can buy options and transparent system has to be created if on the prices front you want to do. I am more a supporter of direct income support. China has recently given, every year they give about 21 to 22 billion dollars to farmers on per hectare basis. and then let the farmers decide what they want to do with it. It's a direct income support. I would say you can make it conditional to improve the environment, to save the water table, to improve the, stop the stubble burning and all that. Instead of PM Kisan 6,000 rupees, I would say give them 20,000 rupees. But then abolish all other subsidies of fertilizer and free power and all this. All these subsidies should be merged in one and given as, that will be a much better and more efficient system.
What happens, because the questions popped up on my screen, how are you going to help small farmers? How are you going to protect small farmers? Please explain. And you will correct me on this number. I've read everything between, majority of India's farmers are smallholders, right? Small
86%.
Yeah.
By international standards, 99% of farmers are smallholders, because international definition is anyone below 10 hectares is a smallholder. Indian definition is anyone below 2 hectares is a smallholder. 86% of India's farmers are smallholders, but they operate about 45-46% of the cropped area. Okay, so smallholders are already surviving. Okay, they do more fruits and vegetables. You yourself said that 6% of the farmers have gained over all these 50 years from MSP system. Yeah. So are you playing only for these 5-6% of the people, or you need better markets for the remaining 94% of the farmers?
What about this question? Farm produces seasonal. At a time of harvest, the crop comes into the open market within 10 to 15 days. But when the farmer brings the crop to the market, the supply often exceeds the demand, the prices drop. The farmer does not have the wherewithal to store.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So how do you get the markets right? You have to allow people to create storage capacity. But if you have laws of stocking limits, who is going to create storage capacity? That's what exactly the issue is. When farmer brings the produce to the market, prices collapse, and then in the lean season there is nothing, then the prices spike. So how do you bring sense and how do you bring stability in the market? So you have to allow. Do you want the Sarkar to be opening all these cold storages and then logistics and then digital platform? Is this Sarkar's job? वो चाइना बॉर्डर पे संभालेगी कि ये आलू प्याज बेचेगी?
Okay, let's end with this. How do a government's job is to communicate effectively? You've spoken about the information asymmetry. You've spoken about misinformation. It's been more than a week that the farmers have been on the road, and the fact is that the farmers I have met, the chorus is only this, that we believe the MSP is vanishing. That is what they believe. They believe the MSP is vanishing.
Misinformation campaign.
I know, but you've heard some of the counters that if you have these two markets, everybody's, the private players will dominate. Now, what should the government be communicating at this point?
If I was the person as a spokesperson of the government, which I'm not, I'm as critical of the government or opposition. I'm a professional. I'm committed to the country. But politically, how the impasse can be, I was seeing on the TV, farmers were saying, "हम आपकी चाय नहीं पियेंगे, आप हमारे लंगर में आइए, हम आपको लंगर खिलाएंगे, जलेबी भी खिलाएंगे." I would accept that. And go to the Gurdwara and sit down and do this. Give them in writing. Your MSP will not go away, and the mandi system.
Give them in writing where? Give them in writing in the law.
Mandi system is, but MSP. There is a difference. The current MSP system is what it is. They announce it. This is not a legal binding on the private sector. Remember this. The point of discussion and debate has moved away from mandi उड़ जाएगी, MSP उड़ जाएगा. This is to me a total misinformation and unfortunately misguidance.
But sir, can you just elaborate on what you just said? And because I'm picking it up on the screen, you've said that give them the MSP guarantee in writing, but make it clear that it's not a legal binding on the private sector. So
exactly. If the government wants to buy, let them buy.
So this writing, are you saying that it can be added to the law that the MSP remains a guaranteed right, and this can be written into the law? Because the whole debate has been that the MSP cannot be legislatively guaranteed, right? That's been the whole debate.
This is exactly what I'm saying. The only government wants to give it. ले लीजिए 23 commodity, then why 23 commodity? मिल्क का भी MSP लगाइए, आलू का भी MSP लगाइए, प्याज का उसने कौन सा गुनाह किया? Because then everybody will shift to MSP. If the government is going to enforce that, there will be a glut of few commodities, and the other commodities, then you will suffer. There will be no production of those.
So can you just explain this point that we see on our screen, which is quoting you, give the MSP in writing, but it is not legal binding on the private sector. So are you in favor?
No, MSP, government existing system is, government announces an MSP.
And the government is already the government from the Prime Minister downwards has already verbally yes, said the MSP is not going away. The farmers want it in writing. You are saying it cannot be legally binding on the private sector, but it can be given in writing. What I'm asking,
it can be given in writing that the existing process of MSP will continue. This is what the existing. Wherever you want, wherever you want, this is for the government to decide where they want to give or not. But the existing system of MSP will continue. There should not be any problem with the government to speak this in public. Prime Minister has said that, give it in writing, wherever you want. Prime Minister के office के बाहर लिख दो, law में लिख दो, कहीं लिख दो. But saying that all the 23 commodities have to be bought by the government, अरे government का बस का ही नहीं है, लगा लो दम. 23 commodities को बिहार से लेके कन्याकुमारी तक आपको अगर MSP देना पड़ेगा देश में, ये देश का finances लुट जाएंगी.
Okay, so I do have to close, but in a simple way, if you had to say to someone who does not understand law, right, who has a broad understanding of these laws from what they've seen in the media or what political parties have communicated or their own fears and insecurities, if you had to address the criticism that there is a kind of what Harish Damodaran has called a conglomerate capitalism, that there'll be a cartel of big business houses that will take over India's agricultural sector, that no private sector anywhere in the world when it comes to agriculture is totally unregulated, what would you say? How do we convince the farmer that this is good for them, which you believe it is?
There is a Competition Commission of India. You may give better teeth to them. Everywhere, private sector, when it comes, the big people take over the smaller ones, and it is an oligopolistic structure. All commodities, most of it, right? Now, when you are moving in agriculture towards that, a regulator, there is a CCI which looks into whether the onion prices has been, manipulated by a few people or not. Give it more teeth, make it more perfect, and make it binding to report who is stocking how much. So that type of information needs to be put in place. But saying that Indian Airlines is the only best airline in the world and we will not allow anybody else, then stop all the other airlines. And others have hijacked and now Indian Airlines has become sick. Well, it should have been sold 20 years back, I would say. The process of creative destruction of the old and inefficient must go for the society to move forward. This is not me saying, the famous Schumpeterian law of the world says this. The societies that refuse to change will decay and drown.
Okay, strong words there. Thank you so much, Ashok Gulati. It's been educative to hear the counter view. I think all this while one has been immersed in what the farmers are feeling on the ground. But I think what's important is that this communication gap, as you've called it, that this is something that only politics can address. This is not something economists or experts can address.
Our job. We can bring only facts. I think it's the government's job to sell and tell the people what these reforms are. And it is perfectly all right for the opposition and others to distort. That's a political battle.
I think I really don't care about the opposition parties, but having spent some time with the farmers, I can tell you there's genuine apprehension among farmers. And I think People who are not affiliated with political parties need someone to talk to them and explain to them that they're not going to be any the poorer for it. Thank you, sir. A very
I would
educated.
go to Langar and have jalebi.
That's the point. I think the Prime Minister should take your advice. In any case, for the jalebi, if for nothing else, langars are always the best food. Thank you so much.
Wish all the best to the farmers, and my heart and my mind and all my life has gone to the betterment of agriculture and farmers, which is more sustainable, And I feel this country has exploited them by suppressing their prices for the sake of so-called poor and made farmers poor. There should be no export bans.
This is
no stocking limits.
Bound to trigger a very interesting set of follow-up conversations, and I'm looking forward to that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.